You're coming in? No, not yet. Okay. Sorry, I thought we had started. That was called a false start. Just blather on for as long as you'd like. I got nothing. Got nothing. Okay, now it's a good morning, everyone. Not that I didn't mean it before. Good morning. As our prelude, we are going to sing together, I Know This Rose Will Open. We're going to sing it through 3 times to bring the spirit of growth and openness as we begin our service. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
Good morning. It's been so long since I've been here. I'm glad to be back. Things will, what is it that you say? Strap in for a bumpy ride? It has been a while since I've been around here, and longer still since I've done service leading. So, and we have the additional challenges around switching between in sanctuary and our connection with our fabulous speaker today, C.B. Beal. So I am asking you to be present with a spirit of deep openness, generosity, calm, willingness to ride along. So it has been a long time since I've been here, so I should probably say, my name is Beverly Horton. Who exactly? My pronouns are she and they, and I'm this morning's service leader. We are grateful to all of those who offer their gifts of time and talent in making our worship services possible. So for today, our music minister, we'll all be ministering to one another musically today, but led principally by our fabulous music director, Rachel Derry. Our tech team today, Brian Carey, Chase Tapley, Claire Miles, and John Elliott. Our worship associates, Sue and Ian Johnstone. Ushers, Karen Moore and Barb Wallace. And our greeters, Marianne Terpstra and Mary Sallig. As I was saying, we are blessed this morning to have as our speaker, C.B. Beal. C.B. has been with us. This will be the third time in the last couple months. C.B. gave a sermon in January about witness, offered a workshop last Saturday teaching us about preemptive radical inclusion, and the sermon today will be an extension of the work that they did with us then. So this is a busy place, so there are every week announcements. Blessedly, there are few that I have to read from the pulpit this morning. So the first one, save the date for our annual general meeting. It's going to be held at noon on Sunday, March 24th after service. We hope you'll attend and help us usher in another fantastic year here at the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. Secondly, donation shelves are empty and the racks are thin at either Rothrell's clothing pantry. Please ask friends and family for donations and donate what you can. You can leave donations at the church or contact Martin Dooley for pickup and drop-off options. Everyone is invited to attend Margaret McFadgen's celebration of life. The memorial service in the sanctuary begins at 2 p.m. The reception in the fellowship hall follows immediately following the service and runs until 5. Food, including, it says here, including chocolate desserts, very important, and hot beverages will be provided. What I'm noting here, though, is the date. I thought so. Next Saturday. Yes. The 23rd? So the next Saturday. Yeah. You can show up this Saturday at 2 o'clock. Nobody's here. Come back the next Saturday at 2 o'clock. If you'd like to say a few words about Margaret during the service, please contact Reverend Jamie. For more information about these events and to register, please see our website and our weekly all-church email. I'd like to invite Rachel, if you wouldn't mind, Rachel, to come and light the chalice this morning. Our chalice is a reminder of the light and hope of our faith. We light it each time we gather to remind us of the sacredness of our time together. Please join me in reading our chalice lighting words. May this flame be our light of friendship and love. We welcome you today, whatever the circumstances of your life, in the many ways we identify as people and in the diversity of how we love and how we live. In this house of faith, we are all included as we search for truth, build community, and strive to make the world a better place for all. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, we are a city of 570,000 people, among whom are 17,000 citizens with Indigenous ancestry from across Turtle Island. The effect of settler colonialism is not a static entry in a history book. It is present in our life today. The responsibility of people with settler ancestry who continue to benefit from the land and its resources is to face the truth of our collective pasts and work for equity and justice in our present world. Only through truth can we hope to reach reconciliation. Please rise in body or spirit, however you feel inclined, at Nabal, to sing our first hymn, which is May Nothing Evil Cross This Door. So our story for all ages, our time for all ages is going to be presented by CB this morning with a story entitled, There's No Such Thing as a Dragon.
Good morning. Jack Kent wrote this story originally. Billy Bixby was rather surprised when they woke up one morning and found a dragon in their room. It was a small dragon, about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell their mother. There's no such thing as a dragon. She said it like she really meant it. Billy went back to their room and began to get dressed. The dragon came close to Billy and waggled its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on its head. Billy washed their face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Billy sat down at the table. The dragon sat on the table. Now, this sort of thing was not usually permitted, but there wasn't much Billy's mother could do about it. She'd already said there's no such thing as a dragon, and if there's no such thing, you can't very well tell it to get down off of the table. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate them too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter, and Billy only got one of them, but they said that's all they really wanted anyway. Billy went upstairs to brush their teeth, and Mother started cleaning the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by that time, made itself comfortable on the hallway rug and went to sleep. By the time Billy came back downstairs, the dragon had grown so much it filled the hallway. Billy had to go around by way of the living room in order to get to where their mother was. I didn't know dragons grew so fast, said Billy. There's no such thing as a dragon, Mother repeated firmly. Mother spent all day going back and forth between the computer on her desk in the kitchen while Billy played. She told herself that she went the long way around through the den for the exercise, not because there was a dragon in the hallway. After lunch, Mother started going out the kitchen window and then climbing back into the room with her computer, since the dragon blocked the entire hallway by now. But she told herself it was for the fresh air, since there's no such thing as a dragon. By mid-afternoon, the dragon filled the whole house. Its tail hung out the back door, and there wasn't a room in the house that didn't have some part of the dragon in it. The dragon's head bumped, bump, 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 bump down the front steps, and it snored softly. And every time it did, the whole house vibrated. When the dragon woke up from its nap, it was hungry. A bakery truck went by, and the smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist. The dragon ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like a shell on a snail or a house on a dragon. The mail carrier was just coming up the path with some mails for the Bixbys when their house rushed past him and headed down the street. He chased the Bixby's house for a few blocks. This was not a normal occurrence. He thought he would check it out, but he couldn't catch it. People came out of their houses and onto their porches as the house and then the mail carrier went by. They thought maybe it's one of these surprise outdoor birthday parades people are having nowadays. But that was the end of it. So they would go back in their houses. Now, when Mr. Bixby came home after his long day at work, the first thing he noticed was that his house was missing. Yeah. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to call from their front porch to tell him which way it went. Mr. Bixby got on his bicycle and he went looking for the house. He studied all the houses up and down the road, and finally he saw one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby waved at him from an upstairs window. Hi, Dad. Mr. Bixby took a deep breath. He climbed over the dragon's nose, over the dragon's head, up the dragon's neck, and onto the porch roof. He went in the house through an upstairs window. He took another deep breath. How, he said in that I'm being calm right now voice, did this happen? There was a dragon, said Billy. There's no such thing, Mother began to say. There is a dragon, Billy insisted. A very big dragon. And Billy reached out the window and patted the dragon on its head. And the dragon waggled its tail happily. And then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller and smaller until it jumped up on the porch roof, and then it was kitten-sized again in Billy's hand. Oh, said Mother, looking over. I don't mind dragons this size. Why did it have to grow so big? Well, I'm not sure, Billy said, but I think it needed to be noticed. Thanks for listening to my story today.
Thank you, CB. I'd like to invite Ursa up to collect the children's chalice, and we'll sing the young folks out. As you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go. Now I realize that CB had some words to share with us for the opening of the service, and we didn't do that. So I'm wondering if we could do that. Yeah, CB, I missed your opening words, and they were lovely ones. In our circle again. So if you wouldn't mind, could you read those, and then we'll move into the meditation?
I'm delighted. We are here in a circle of love and trust, brought to this moment by a series of choices and promises, by hope and gratitude, by our own shadows faced and befriended. With a servant's heart, with a leader's listening, let us model the health we seek for all and lean into community. Somewhere out there, all we dream is possible. Somewhere in here, we're sowing the seeds.
I'd like you to hold CB's words in your heart as we move into our time for meditation. Invite you to relax, close your eyes if you wish, and breathe deeply. Following our reading, there will be a few moments of silence followed by music. During the music, you are welcome to come up and light a candle of joy or concern. So I had chosen for our meditation words this morning a poem by a poet who's become a dear friend of mine over the last few years. It's Reverend Julian Soto. It's a poem I've probably shared with you once before, but it's one that I really love and would like to share with you again today. It's called We Hold Hope Close. In this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know just what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath, the foundation of our values and ethics. We are the people who return to love like a North Star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer in an indistinct future. Rather, we know the way to the world to which and of which we dream. And by covenant and the movement forward of one right action and the next, we know that one day we will arrive at home. May it be so. Part of building a nurturing community includes sharing our joys and sorrows. Today, the written, I'd say, appreciation and joy comes to us from Jen Reed. I know some of you were here last week for celebration of life, Jen's father, Brian Reed. Jen writes, we held the celebration of life for my dad, Brian Reed, on Saturday, March 2nd, here at the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. During the service, we didn't mention the significance of the blue pottery piece. In 2022, Reverend Jamie offered Poem on a Pot as a silent auction item. I placed a successful bid and wrote Lake of the Woods about my dad's love of his northern home and Lunny's Island. Jamie made the beautiful pottery which I gave with the poem to my dad for Christmas. It was an amazing thing to be part of a church community. I feel extremely appreciative to my parents for raising me as a Unitarian. Having a space to say goodbye and a team to help organize was so emotionally comforting. Thank you to Beverly for leading a lovely service, to Mary Ann and Rachel for the music, to Josh and Chase for the technical support, and to Joanne for her support in organizing the space. After the reception, a team of caring people jumped in to clean up. Sheila, Martin, Gail, Mary Ann, Joanne. If I missed others, Jen says, I apologize. I really appreciate your time and care and felt the support of a caring community. Thank you. My dad would have loved the celebration of life experience. He poured a lot of love and money in the church, and being a Unitarian was important to him. May his memory be a blessing, Jen. That was a joy that was shared. We know that there are sorrows among us that are too tender to share. We hold those in this space today with the reminder that we are never alone. And for those joys that were not shared today, we collectively celebrate those joys among us and rejoice in the happiness that flows through our community. The offering we accept each Sunday is an opportunity to recommit ourselves to this community and to our relationship to one another. When we give, we say yes to something that we value. With gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. This morning, as we receive our offering, we will also be making a musical offering to one another in the form of a short sung response that Rachel will lead us in. I will offer a statement, a collective statement for us, and we will respond with the sung response. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin in love.
So let's learn the sung response first, and it's very simple. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. You want to sing it with me? We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
Would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible,
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
for each time we have struck out in anger without just cause,
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
for each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others,
We begin again.
for the selfishness that set us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
We begin again in love. Your gifts in support of our ministries to one another and to the community are greatly appreciated. Thank you. And now it is my pleasure to invite CB back to deliver their sermon today on preemptive radical inclusion. 3 words that are much more than the sum of their parts. CB.
Thank you. It is a blessing to be back among you. I love that hymn that we just sung, set to the words of the late Rob Eller Isaac. This morning, I'm going to talk about preemptive radical inclusion. And the practice of preemptive radical inclusion requires us to begin where we are and continually begin again in love. I invite you to humility that discards shame as unhelpful, and to aspiration that reaches the level of commitment. Will you take a breath with me? Settle in and get comfortable. If you were here in January, you know I have things to say. Now, the idea of preemptive radical inclusion is fairly simple, right? Those of us who hold any kind of leadership, and in UU congregations, I understand that to be all of us in different ways and at different times. We have the responsibility to learn, change, and grow to preemptively create radical changes that will include people in our collective movement towards equity and justice and liberation. We choose to all get free together. Now, a simple example of what I mean by preemptive might be putting access ramps in buildings wherever there are stairs. We don't wait until we know someone personally who needs one before we build it. Physical accessibility and universal design can simply be part of how we do business. In the process, those of us who use wheels to get around will experience more justice and equity in their ability to move through the world. And we all change in our perspective and attitude. We all begin to notice other places when there aren't accessibility ramps, and we think to do something about it. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Last January, I told you that I'm descended from 400 years of Puritans and other settler colonialists, from people with names like Harbottle Grimscott, who I'm sure pronounced it exactly like that with that voice. Yes. But from England and Scotland via Plymouth, Mass, and then Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, I come from people who cling to radical individualism in the absolute assuredness that our way is the best way and the only way. Puritans and others of those early settlers weren't that big on feelings or words for feelings. Do you remember mine? I had 3 growing up. Mad, sad, and what was the other one again? Oh yeah, mad. Puritans weren't good at noticing their own or other people's feelings or thinking that they mattered. Those of us who come from Puritan roots, and those of us who come from the more theoretically generic white people's individualistic and perfectionist culture, and those of us who might not come from it, but nonetheless swim in the waters, well, this is a tough time to be us. It's a hard time to be a person. What with our individualism and not many feeling words in a world that is devastated, hurt, and violent. We're in a continuing pandemic that would be so expensive and unpopular to properly eradicate that our governments, the US, Canada, and around the world, now rather pretend it isn't a risk than deal with the complexity of that risk. Both of our countries experienced giant trucker caravans opposing health measures, and rather than lean into science and medicine and invest in a public education effort, after only a month, both countries chose immediate economic benefit and basically affirmed the individual, air quotes, right to breathe a virus at people. The individual right to have your face out and not get vaccinated won over the idea of a common good and community care. There's continued police and economic violence. Indigenous women are still missing and murdered, and incredibly little is done about it. In the US, racist violence by police is still high, and our police officers can commit murder on camera, and the system that says back up your fellow officers and don't interrupt what they're doing is more powerful than the idea that people should not die during an arrest. In Canada, the Niagara Regional Police Service has a new chief. Chief of Police 40 said in 2020 that there was no evidence of racism in policing. Meanwhile, the NRPS in 2022, 23% of the officer interactions that involved the use of force were against people perceived as Black. 23% of use of force. 3% of the region is Black. 40 got in a little trouble for his statement, and he has since acknowledged that there are systematic barriers. And a few weeks ago, as, evidence of forward movement, he held up that his force now has increased diversity. This is a common response in both the US and Canada. We will acknowledge systemic problems and barriers, and then we'll try to fix the barriers by changing diversity. But barriers and dysfunctional systems require intervention. You can't just put more people into a dysfunctional system and expect the system to behave differently. The police murder of Tyree Nichols in Memphis proved that. A mosaic tiled table might be beautiful, but if the legs of the table are uneven, the table itself is unstable. It is dysfunctional. The mosaic might be the part that we see, but it is the structures and systems that make something functional or dysfunctional, helpful or harmful. Climate disaster, homelessness, a healthcare system in near shambles. Individualism and not many feeling words is not doing us a favor right now. Will you take a breath with me? We begin again in love. I was raised on a small farm. So my roots were not just Puritan, but I was socialized with cows, and raised with a strong belief in productivity, American exceptionalism, and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I was raised to think carefully and logically about something. If our old Ford tractor wouldn't start, There was only three things. It had to be a problem with fuel, fire, or air. I was raised to know how to think, to believe that there was probably just one way to approach things, and since it turned out I was good at it, the thinking, well, of course I would be right. Those of us descended from subtler colonialists, those of us who have been part of the structures of the erstwhile democracies those colonialists set up, we live in a system designed to benefit us first and foremost, designed so it would make sense to us, so we could continue to believe we're good at the thinking. So many of us were raised to believe our own thoughts and ideas so much that we might not even notice when we have an idea instead of remembering a fact. Now, in my own life, relying on my own assessment has led to some unfortunate circumstances. In January, I promised to share how I am my own cautionary tale. Yeah. When I went to seminary in the mid-1980s as a young adult, I arrived confident that I already knew so much. It was seminary when I first experienced someone who shared that they were allergic to gluten. Gluten, I said. Who's allergic to gluten? People have been eating wheat as a basic staple for thousands of years. People aren't allergic to staples. This tone of voice, this look on my face, that muscle right there, that's disbelieving contempt. But since I still didn't know my feeling words, I was pretty sure only other people were ever contemptuous. And then someone kept asking us not to wear perfume because she was allergic to scents. So how can you be allergic to fragrance? Smell is just like smelling. People have been smelling things for thousands of years. No one's allergic to smelling. I didn't have enough knowledge then to understand that the smell of something is it's the way a chemical compound enters the body, through the nose. The same way a virus does. Floats through the air, enters through the nose. But then, I didn't know that in the US there's dozens of chemicals that are used in fragrances that were banned in Europe for dangerousness. I didn't have enough knowledge then to understand those things, and oh my goodness, and I couldn't simply believe them. Without a second thought, I substituted my personal experience of no sensitivity to perfume or gluten for these people's lived experience. And my own assuredness that I was right trumped their experience to the extent that I mocked them. Not to their face, but I mocked them. Now, subsequently, and possibly as proof of a deity who exists solely to provide me with really awkward learning opportunities, I've become a person with celiac disease who can't eat even microscopic bits of gluten. Yeah. But wait, there's more. There's more. I'm now also a person who's incredibly sensitive to fragrances and petroleum products and all sorts of common chemical compounds. And also flowers and trees and grass, well, pretty much nature. Lots of things that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. So I've been this person who uses their own reality to judge others. I called it unfortunate a moment ago, and I can find some humor in it now to use it as a cautionary tale, but my attitude and behavior were really harmful. I hurt people. Will you take a breath with me? We begin again in love. I had to learn to believe people when they told me about an experience I did not share. Just as I've had to learn to believe the emerging consensus of a group when they share their experience of life that was missing from the schooling and media of my own upbringing. This meant that I had to learn not to believe my own thoughts, because I could only think within the framework I had been taught. I had to learn in my own mind to differentiate ideas from truths, hypotheses from facts. What I think first and most immediately is usually what I was taught the earliest. I told you last time I was here that as a child I was considered a failed girl, a tomboy. As an adult, it took a long time to find language for my gender, and I went through a lot of attempts that added up to I'm a butch, queer, tomboy, farm girl, masculine of center, womanish type person. And thank goodness for people exploring gender and language, and that I was not required to rely only on my own thoughts. And I can now simply say I'm trans non-binary. Long before I understood myself as non-binary, when I hadn't yet realized that men and women are not two discrete opposites, I had an employee in my congregation who used they and them as their pronouns. I practiced in my car every day on the way to work. Adrian is working. They will want to ask me questions. I want to be respectful of them. I wonder what they have planned for the day. I wonder if they did anything on the to-do list that they had. And I would go over it and over it because it's my job to practice so that I would get it right, or at least notice if I messed up. Pronouns are designed to go unnoticed. They're placeholders. So we must choose to make them noticeable. When I make a mistake, I must correct myself. I live in a world, though, where not everyone corrects themselves or notices when they use the wrong pronoun for a person. Some people deny my experience, or Billy's, Billy in our story today let me know in about 2019 that they were non-binary too, and I should be changing the words in the story to they and them. All too often people say, non-binary? That's not a thing. I've never heard of it. I can't imagine. No one is non-binary. There have been men and women for thousands of years, and that's it. Where I need people to believe me, to accept my experience in the emerging consensus among gender non-conforming people that there are more than two genders, although most of you fit comfortably within two of them. And we know this because of our experience. There's more than two. Other people instead will substitute their judgment. Or maybe they'll believe, sure, it's a thing, but it's not very important. Like just a little bit of gluten. Well, it's just the fragrance in my hairspray, but I didn't use perfume. Just a little bit of misgendering. These things are harmful. But here I am, the person who has had experience not believing somebody else, substituting my thoughts, and I am also a person who other people don't believe my experience. I don't have to bear shame over this. When we know better, we do better. We begin again in love. But I do need to be intentional about learning to know and do better. I don't know better or do better by accident. We only begin again in love because we choose to. For me to be preemptively and radically inclusive of people, I must recognize that they experience their lives and circumstances in society in ways I could not. Not just in ways I don't, but in ways that I couldn't. I will never know what it is to be a young black man pulled over by the police. I can't walk a mile in someone's shoes. What I can do is believe people when they share their lives. When thousands of Indigenous, Black, and other people of color share about institutionalized discrimination in healthcare, law enforcement, housing, hiring, congregational lives, and so much more. Even if I have never experienced race-based discrimination, my responsibility is to believe them. I've made the idea, don't believe everything you think, part of my perspective. It means that I must notice when my assumptions and other people's statements don't match up. And I have to lean into the discomfort of the possibility that I am wrong. Not reach first to make someone else prove it, prove that discrimination, or prove your gender, but to reach first into myself to explore, why am I so automatically certain? When I do this right, it is a remarkably humbling practice. Preemptive radical inclusion means that we must preemptively seek the emerging consensus of people and groups who are marginalized and oppressed in ways we are not, so that we can prepare ourselves to be radically inclusive, so that we can change. We must be willing to engage stories and experiences of those who are marginalized in ways we bear privilege. In this way, we who are cisgender learn about the oppression of trans people. We who are white learn about how Black, Indigenous, and other people of color experience marginalization and oppression by listening, reading, reflecting, following people on social media, intentionally choosing to watch documentaries or Origin or any number of great things instead of that really comforting British mystery we all love, and by regularly checking our thoughts. It's not one book or 2 workshops, but a series of choices we make about learning what was kept from us in our previous or formal learning. We might join recovery groups that help us heal from past injuries, and the complexities of being both told that we're absolutely right and also raised in a family that might have personally told us we were always wrong. There's some work to do around that. Okay. We individually and collectively make decisions to increase our ability to create justice and equity. Some of us made it all the way to the pandemic, believing in pulling oneself up by your bootstraps, only to find out during the pandemic what it is like if the boots are suddenly fragile or the straps are missing. Some of us only recently discovered or realized that radical individualism is a myth created and supported by communities of radical individualists who helped one another. Maybe we remember that settlers built their structures together and were taught how to farm on North American soil by indigenous peoples who willingly shared what they knew, not initially understanding that the Puritans and other Europeans were taking, not sharing their land. Maybe we remember there were people who fed Henry David Thoreau dinner every night and did his laundry while he was off in the woods, and that he did chores at home. Or that Jack Kerouac came home to his mom for months at a time so she could nurse him back to health after his adventures. Radical individualism is a lie perpetuated by a culture designed for patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism. And so many of us have bought into how these systems lead us to deny ourselves and one another in the service of power and money. That's how they work. In our current political and social situation, being inclusive means taking on a whole new frame. It isn't simply welcoming someone who knocks on the door with a smile or restructuring our language to include people of other genders. It isn't simply increasing the colors in our mosaic. Preemptive radical inclusion means that we constantly work to increase our ability to ensure that everyone's needs are being met, sometimes even as those needs are changing, even as those needs are under assault from those who would deny human rights to some people, would limit or ban the full range of reproductive health care, would ban the books of two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, plus, or folks or Black topics. There is such a thing as a dragon. And we have to tell the truth in order to right-size the problem that we must deal with. You know, the story I read today ends before Billy's family has to figure out how to correct the problem and to do reconciliation within the system because the house is no longer on their plot. It's way down the street. There's work to be done. To practice preemptive radical inclusion, we must choose to notice our thoughts and then not believe them. They might be right, but we have to check. They might be beliefs masquerading as facts. They might be the thing our Nana taught us when we were very, very small that we now know is not true, yet it pops in our head. We must notice if the words about injustice coming out of our mouths echo what we were taught early in life, or if they are meaningfully influenced by those most impacted by injustice. We must practice new ways of speaking and acting as we bend the moral and material arc of the universe towards justice. Would you take a breath with me? We begin again in love. As the earth warms and pandemic continues to rage, even as most of our culture is in denial, we have a choice. As systems of oppression that may not be immediately evident to us continue to harm others, we have a choice. The evidence that doing the work of preemptive radical inclusion, the evidence that it's been successful, isn't that our mosaic has changed hue. It is that we have changed. That's what the word radical points to. We will be radically changed. We build a ramp before we know someone who needs one because it's right. Even if no one ever needed one, we're ready. We examine ourselves and our communities for those ways that we have missed the boat and fallen short of creating actual justice while we use the language of justice. And when we notice, we make the necessary changes. We understand that inclusion is a doorway, not a goal. It's a doorway to equity, and then justice, and then liberation. I believe that we can and must live the reality that when we say all of us, it actually means all of us. And I believe that we can, because that's who we are, Unitarian Universalists. We are the people who choose to act preemptively to make the world a better place, imperfectly, but within covenant and with commitment, beginning again in love every day. We can choose to learn what we need to create an inclusion that moves all of us closer to justice. We can choose to all get free together. Will you come with me? Good. Amen, and blessed be.
closing words for service this morning, written by the Reverend Leslie Takahashi. Very short poem entitled On the Brink. All that we have ever loved, all that we have ever been, stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create, a deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a deeper joy in this life we share. Please remain seated for our postlude.
Of which I hope you will sing with me. And thank you for putting up with my sort of voice today. I thought I might not have a voice today, so yay, at least I have a little bit of it. But the problem is that we have a little bit of squeaking that happens, so I thank you for being patient. So we're going to end this service with Rivers of Grace. And some of you may know it, some may not. But I definitely invite you to sing. It's come into the healing river, rivers of grace. Come into the healing river, river of grace. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace, flowing down, down, down to my soul. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace, flowing down, down, down to my soul. Let's do that again. Come into the healing river, river of grace. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace, flowing down, down, down to my soul. Now we're going to sing that, but we're going to change the words just a bit. It's going to sing, love shines in this river, okay? Love shines in this healing